The cold wind cut through my thin hoodie like a blade, but I was used to it. Being homeless meant you got familiar with discomfort real quick. I pulled my sleeves down over my freezing fingers and walked down the dimly lit street, searching for a quiet spot to rest. The city never slept, but I wished I could. That's when I heard it, a muffled cry, followed by the unmistakable sound of struggle. Instinct took over before logic could kick in. I sprinted toward the noise and saw a man in a black hoodie pinning a woman against the alley wall. Her purse was clutched tightly in his hand, and she was trying to fight back, but he was stronger. "Let go of me," she screamed, her voice trembling. The mugger didn't see me coming. I charged forward, slamming my shoulder into his side. He stumbled, and before he could react, I swung my fist with everything I had. Pain shot through my knuckles as I connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling onto the ground. The woman gasped. The mugger growled and scrambled up, but I was faster. I kicked his leg out from under him, and he collapsed again. He hesitated, glanced at me, then at the woman, and bolted into the night. Panting, I turned to her. She was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling as she clutched her purse. "Are you okay?" I asked. Her eyes met mine, deep brown, wide with shock. But behind them, there was something else. Not fear. Curiosity. Yeah, she stammered. "Thank you." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "It's nothing." She looked me up and down, taking in my ragged hoodie, the torn jeans, the scuffed-up sneakers barely holding together. Then she did something I didn't expect. She smiled. She stood there for a moment, as if trying to make sense of me. Then, to my surprise, she extended her hand. "I'm Isabel," she said. I hesitated before shaking it. Liam. Liam, she repeated, like she was testing how it felt to say my name. "You don't have a place to stay, do you?" My stomach tightened. I was used to people looking at me with pity, but her tone wasn't laced with that. She was just asking. "No," I admitted. She glanced at her phone, then back at me. "Come with me." I frowned. "What?" "I want to thank you properly," she said. "Come on." Everything in me screamed that this was crazy. She didn't know me. I didn't know her. But there was something in the way she said it, calm, certain. For some reason, I followed. A sleek black car was waiting at the curb. A driver in a crisp suit opened the door for her. She slid in first, then looked up at me expectantly. I swallowed hard. This was not my world, but I climbed in anyway. As we drove, I kept my eyes on the city lights streaking past. Everything about this was surreal. When the car finally stopped, my jaw nearly hit the floor. The mansion loomed before me, glowing under the streetlights. A grand, modern masterpiece of glass and steel. I turned to Isabel, my voice dry. "Who are you?" She chuckled. "I was wondering when you'd ask." The car door opened, and the driver nodded at us. Isabel stepped out, and I followed like a lost puppy. "I own this place," she said casually, gesturing at the mansion. "Actually, I own quite a few places." I blinked. "That mugger really messed up, didn't he?" She smirked. "I'm Isabel Carter, CEO of Carter Industries." The name hit me like a brick. Isabel Carter, billionaire, tech genius, one of the youngest self-made businesswomen in the country. I had just saved her, and now I was standing in her driveway. Inside, the mansion was even more ridiculous. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, walls lined with artwork that probably cost more than my entire existence. I was suddenly hyper-aware of my dirty clothes, the smell of the street clinging to me. "You hungry?" Isabel asked. My stomach betrayed me with a growl. She grinned. "I'll take that as a yes." Minutes later, I was sitting at a massive dining table with a plate of food in front of me. I ate like a starving man, because I was one. Isabel watched me, arms crossed. "You're different." I paused, fork halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" Most people would have ignored that mugging, especially someone in your situation. But you ran in without hesitation. I shrugged. "Did what anyone would do." She tilted her head. "No, you did what a good person would do." Her gaze was sharp, assessing. Then she leaned forward. "Liam, I want to make you an offer." I set my fork down. "What kind of offer?" "You saved my life," she said. "Now I want to help you." I frowned. "I don't need." "Yes, you do," she interrupted. "You need a fresh start." I stared at her, unsure what to say. "You can work for me," she continued. "A real job, a real paycheck, a real chance." I swallowed. This was insane. I should have said no. But the weight of the streets, the exhaustion of struggling every day, pushed me toward a different answer. What's the catch? She smiled. No catch. And just like that, my life changed forever. Walking into Carter Industries for my first day of work felt like stepping into a completely different universe. The building itself was a masterpiece. Glass walls stretching toward the sky, the sleek logo gleaming above the entrance like a beacon of power and prestige. I tugged at the borrowed blazer Isabel had insisted I wear. It felt unnatural, stiff. Just a few days ago, I was sleeping on the streets, and now, here I was, walking into one of the most powerful tech companies in the country. Isabel led the way, her presence commanding. People parted for her like she was royalty. I tried to ignore the stares, the whispers. Who's that? Did she just bring a homeless guy into the company? I clenched my fists but kept my head high. Let them talk. I wasn't here for them. Inside, the air smelled like fresh coffee and polished ambition. Employees worked at futuristic-looking desks, giant screens flashing stock numbers and project designs. I felt like an imposter. Welcome to Carter Industries, Isabel said as we stepped into her massive glass-walled office. She turned to me with a smirk. Overwhelmed yet. Understatement of the century, I muttered. She chuckled and handed me a sleek ID badge with my name. Liam Carter, special assistant to the CEO. My breath hitched. I stared at the name. Carter. Wait, why does my badge say Carter? I asked, looking at her. She arched a brow. Because I own the company, and I don't want people treating you like an outsider. As far as they know, you're family. Family. The word hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't had a family in years. But before I could say anything, the door burst open. A tall man in an expensive suit stormed in, his expression tight with barely concealed anger. Isabel, what the hell is going on? I stiffened as he glanced at me with disgust, like I was a stain on his perfectly tailored world. Isabel folded her arms. Good morning to you too, Jonathan. Jonathan, Isabel's right-hand man. I recognized him from the news, her top advisor, the one everyone assumed would take over if she ever stepped down. He sneered. You bring this into the company and expect us to take you seriously? My jaw tightened, but before I could say anything, Isabel stepped forward, her voice like steel. Liam is my guest, my employee, and my choice. If you have a problem with that, Jonathan, you're welcome to leave. Jonathan's face darkened. You're making a mistake. I don't make mistakes, Isabel shot back. A muscle ticked in Jonathan's jaw, but he forced a tight smile. We'll see about that. With one last glare at me, he turned and strode out. I exhaled. That guy hates me. Isabel sighed. Jonathan hates anyone who he can't control. But don't worry. He's not your problem. I wasn't so sure about that. I spent the next few days adjusting to my new role. Isabel didn't just throw me in the deep end. She tossed me into the ocean during a storm. Meetings, schedules, reports. I barely had time to breathe. But I learned fast. I had to. The hardest part wasn't the work. It was the people. They didn't trust me. They thought I was a joke. Some pet project Isabel had picked up on a whim. I overheard them whispering. He won't last a week. Did she pity hire him? I could have walked away. Let them think whatever they wanted. But I didn't. Instead, I worked harder. Longer. I studied everything, business strategies, Carter Industries' biggest deals, the history of the company. And then, one night, an opportunity landed right in my lap. A high-stakes investor meeting was scheduled for the next morning, but Isabel was stuck in back-to-back negotiations. Jonathan was supposed to handle it, but I saw the files. The numbers didn't add up. Something was off. I spent the entire night digging through the data, cross-checking figures, running calculations. And what I found made my blood run cold. The deal Jonathan was pushing through? A trap. He was setting Isabel up for failure. And if I didn't stop it, she'd lose everything. The next morning, I walked into the conference room before Isabel arrived. Jonathan was already there, looking smug as he prepared his presentation. I sat down across from him, sliding a folder across the table. What's this? He asked, barely glancing at it. Proof, I said. The deal you're about to pitch? It's a scam. The numbers don't match. If we sign, Carter Industries will take a loss while our competitors walk away with everything. His smirk faded. I leaned forward. I know what you're doing, Jonathan, and I know why. He met my gaze, cold and calculating. Then, to my surprise, he laughed. You think you're smart, don't you? He shook his head. You're nothing, Liam. A stray Isabel picked up off the street. No one here takes you seriously. My hands curled into fists, but I forced myself to stay calm. We'll see about that, I said evenly. The door opened, and Isabel walked in. What's going on? Jonathan smiled, standing up. Just briefing the kid on how the real world works. I stood too. Actually, I was briefing him on how fraud works. Jonathan's face darkened. I turned to Isabel and handed her my notes. The numbers don't add up. If we move forward with this deal, we'll lose millions. Isabel's eyes flickered across the documents, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she set them down. Is this true, Jonathan? He hesitated for half a second too long. Isabel's jaw tightened. Get out. Jonathan's face went pale. Isabel, be reasonable. I said get out. The room fell silent. Jonathan clenched his fists but stormed out without another word. The moment the door shut, Isabel turned to me, her gaze sharp. How did you figure this out? I swallowed. I stayed up all night going through the reports. Something didn't sit right, so I dug deeper. She studied me for a long moment. Then, to my shock, she smiled. Liam, you just saved my company. And for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged. Jonathan wasn't the type to walk away quietly. That same night, as I left Carter Industries, I felt eyes on me. The city lights flickered, shadows stretching longer than they should. Then BM, a pair of hands grabbed my collar and slammed me against the alley wall. Big shot now, huh? A voice sneered. I recognized him. One of Jonathan's hired thugs. Before I could react, a fist rammed into my stomach. Pain shot through me. Stay out of things you don't understand, the thug hissed. Another punch. My knees buckled, but I gritted my teeth. I wasn't going down. I swung blindly, my fist connecting with his jaw. He stumbled, cursing. Then headlights. A car screeched to a stop. The door flung open, and Isabel's furious voice echoed through the alley. Touch him again, and you'll wish you were never born. The thug bolted. Isabel rushed to me, her hands on my shoulders. Liam, are you okay? I wiped the blood from my lip and nodded. I'm fine. Her eyes darkened. Jonathan did this. I spat to the side. Yeah, and if he thinks I'm scared, he's dead wrong. Her lips curled into a smirk. Good, because I'm about to destroy him. The next morning, Isabel walked into Carter Industries like a storm on the warpath. Within hours, she unleashed hell. 1. Jonathan's accounts. Frozen. 2. His access. Revoked. 3. His secret embezzlement. Exposed. The board was in shock. They had trusted Jonathan. Now, they were watching him unravel. At the emergency meeting, Jonathan stormed in, desperate to defend himself. You have no proof, he spat. Isabel leaned back in her chair, utterly composed. I don't need proof. She gestured toward me. Liam found everything, and he made sure it's airtight. Jonathan paled. You let him. She cut him off. I trust Liam more than I ever trusted you. His jaw clenched. You'll regret this. Isabel smirked. No, Jonathan. You will. Security escorted him out. I watched, breathing heavily. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was winning. And Jonathan? He was just getting started with his revenge. Jonathan was desperate. Within days, the media exploded. Ex-CEO's assistant exposed as a fraud. Isabel Carter's new right-hand man has a criminal past. Ex-homeless man, manipulating the tech empire. Lies. All of it. I clenched my fists as reporters swarmed me. Liam, were you really arrested before? Are you stealing from Carter Industries? Is Isabel covering up your past? I couldn't even breathe. Isabel called me into her office, her face unreadable. I was ready for her to say, it's too much, Liam. I have to let you go. But instead, she did something I never expected. She stood up for me. She called a press conference. And right there, in front of the world, she spoke the words that changed everything. Liam isn't just my assistant. He saved my life. And I trust him more than anyone in this industry. Her voice was fierce, unshakable. And just like that, the country chose sides. Half the world was against me, but half of it was watching. And Jonathan, he was about to make his final move. Jonathan wasn't finished. Humiliated and cast out, he was desperate for revenge. And this time, he wasn't just attacking my reputation. He was going after Isabel's entire empire. Late one night, Isabel called me to her office. She was pale, gripping a stack of documents. I don't know how, she murmured, her voice tense, but Jonathan just filed a lawsuit. He's claiming I stole company funds. If this sticks, I could lose everything. My stomach turned to ice. This is a setup, I said. I know, she snapped. But the court doesn't. She dropped in her chair, pressing her fingers to her temples. We have 1 week before the hearing. If we don't fight back now, Carter Industries is finished. I clenched my fists. Jonathan had taken his shot. Now was our turn. I spent the next 4 days buried in paperwork, tracking every dollar that had moved in and out of Carter Industries over the past year. Then I found it. Buried under layers of forged transactions, Jonathan had been stealing money for months. He hadn't just set Isabel up. He had used the lawsuit as a distraction to cover his own tracks. And now, we had the proof. This is it, I said, slamming the files onto Isabel's desk. We can end him. She looked up, fire blazing in her eyes. Then let's make him pay. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, business executives, investors who had once sworn loyalty to Isabel but now sat waiting for her to fall. And at the front, Jonathan, smug, confident. He thought he had already won. The judge called for evidence. Jonathan's lawyer stepped up first, spinning a beautiful lie about stolen money and corruption. Then Isabel stood, calm, deadly. She handed the judge the files we had found. The courtroom fell silent. Jonathan's face turned pale as the judge flipped through the pages. Mr. Reeves, the judge said, his voice cold, would you like to explain why these financial records show that you, not Ms. Carter, embezzled over $10 million? Gasps. Murmurs. Jonathan's lawyer stammered. Jonathan froze. And Isabel? She just smirked. Game. Over. By the time we left the courthouse, the world had exploded. Jonathan Reeves arrested for embezzlement. Isabel Carter proves her innocence and exposes her betrayer. Liam Carter, the man who took down a billionaire scammer. My name was everywhere. People started seeing me differently, not as a homeless guy Isabel had taken pity on, but as the man who had saved her company. And Isabel, she wasn't just back. She was stronger than ever. A week later, Isabel called me into her office. You did it, Liam, she said, leaning back in her chair. I shook my head. We did it. She smiled. You know, when I first met you, I had no idea you'd become my greatest ally. I chuckled. Neither did I. She pushed a folder toward me. I opened it, and my heart stopped. It was ownership papers. 4 shares in Carter Industries. My hands trembled. What is this? She smirked. It's called a promotion. You're not my assistant anymore, Liam. I looked at her in shock. You're my partner. I stood outside Carter Industries that night, staring at the massive glass building that had once seemed so far out of reach. A month ago, I had nothing. No home, no future, no hope. Now, I was part owner of one of the most powerful companies in the country. I had fought, I had bled, and I had won. As I stood there, I spotted a young kid, maybe 17, curled up against the sidewalk, wearing the same hopeless look I once had. I walked over, pulled a $100 bill from my wallet, and handed it to him. His eyes widened. W.I. I smiled. Because someone once helped me, I said, and now it's my turn. His hands trembled as he took the money. For the first time, I realized something. This wasn't about money, or power, or revenge. This was about breaking the cycle. I wasn't just a homeless kid who got lucky. I was someone who had fought through the worst. Someone who had been knocked down, humiliated, nearly destroyed, but still stood back up. And the world had watched every step of my journey. And now, they weren't just watching. They were inspired. Because if I could rise from nothing, then anyone could.